Hey everyone, I'm Muna and welcome to my video. Today I wanted to dive into a debate that's been circulating in the fighting game community. Are fighting games really harder than other genres? Opinions are split, and while I've heard plenty of arguments on both sides, I'm here to share my take. And spoiler alert, I believe fighting games are inherently harder than most other genres. Not all, but most. And I will tell you why. Let me kick this off by saying no disrespect to anyone, especially not to creators like Sajam, who's been a long-standing figure in the FGC. His skill is undeniable. I mean, the guy can climb from diamond to master rank in a few hours. Most of us can't even dream of doing that, so it's clear he's either naturally gifted or has put in a monumental amount of work into mastering his craft. But for us mere mortals, fighting games don't come that easy. One of the aspects that make fighting games even more difficult, in my opinion, is the sheer variety in control schemes between different titles. Take Tekken and Street Fighter, for example. Both are iconic in the fighting game world, yet their control schemes are worlds apart. In Street Fighter, you've got 6 buttons dedicated to punches and kicks, along with the focus and quarter circles and half circle inputs for special moves. Meanwhile, in Tekken operates with a completely different system, utilizing a 4-button layout that maps each button to a specific limb: left punch, left kick, right kick, and it also heavily relies on directional inputs for intricate combos. The thing is, mastering one game's control scheme doesn't mean you'll easily transition into the other. A Street Fighter player used to executing quarter circles or dragon punch motions will have a hard time. I think they will, especially for the first time, they will find themselves lost when trying to adapt to Tekken's deep reliance on complex movement, like that Korean backdash, which you don't need. But these motions are muscle memory heavy, and the techniques don't transfer from each game to another as easily as you might expect. It's almost like learning to drive on the right side of the road and then suddenly being forced to switch to the left. There's an overlap, but it's a jarring transition that requires relearning fundamental skills, and I know that. You compare this to shooters where controls are far more standardized. In most first-person or third-person shooters, whether you're playing Call of Duty, Fortnite, or Halo, you'll find familiar mechanics. Aim with the right stick or mouse, shoot with the right trigger or left click, and reload with a single button. It's damn near universal. Sure, there are slight variations in movement speed, aiming sensitivities, or specific keybinds, but the core mechanic transfer easily from one game to the next. Once you've learned the basics of aiming and shooting in one game, you can carry those skills to almost any other shooter with minimal adjustment. In fighting games, however, the mental and physical demand required to switch from Tekken to Street Fighter or Guilty Gear or Mortal Kombat, it's steep. They're very steep. Every game feels like learning an entirely new language, where the muscle memory you've built for one game may actively hinder you in another. And I think this lack of standardization is a huge part of what makes fighting games even harder to master as a genre. While one control scheme is second nature in one game, it might totally be almost useless in another. That's what I think. So this difficult barrier caused by the lack of transferable control skills doesn't exist in many other genres, especially shooters. In fighting games, you're constantly having to remap your muscle memory, adapt to an entirely new system, learn character-specific inputs from scratch. There's a constant relearning process, and it's a major factor in why I and many others believe that fighting games are inherently more difficult than most genres. I've been playing fighting games for as long as I can remember. My journey began with, I think, Mortal Kombat 2, or was it 3? Honestly, I was too young to remember which, but back then I was just mashing buttons, clueless about fireballs or the bicycle kicks. The flashy fatalities and the brutal uppercuts that knocked your opponent from the next stage to the next, that was my jam. But the real strategy, the combos, forget about it. I just hit buttons and hoped for the best. that didn't stop me from falling in love with the genre. My mom even bought me MK Deadly Alliance, probably unaware of how gory it was, and I just kept mashing away. Fast forward through Deception, Armageddon, and eventually Street Fighter 4. And then it started to hit me. These games weren't about mashing buttons anymore. YouTube was around, I could watch people play. So I finally found out they demanded more. When I finally decided to take fighting games seriously, I realized how tough it was. My friends and I, a diverse group of button mashers, we agreed to make Street Fighter 4 our game. Out of all of us, I was the only one who could consistently throw fireballs. It took me hours of practice just to nail that simple input. It was humbling. Meanwhile, my friends all moved on. They just could not hang. They didn't have the patience, and they didn't want to sit down to learn how to link buttons. Street Fighter 4 was a hard game. And you know what? I felt the same. I felt it was just way too hard for me. It was humbling. So we all moved on. Yeah, we moved on to shooters like Call of Duty or GTA. And suddenly, we were all pretty good. We were all on equal footing again. And why is that? Well, I think it's because shooters, oftentimes, the success all boils down to pointing and shooting. A much lower barrier to entry compared to mastering what most would consider a complex combo or input system. Now, don't get me wrong, shooters can be tough too, but there is a difference. A headshot in Call of Duty is the same whether it's your first or your 112,000th. In fighting games, there is no equivalent to a one-shot kill. You've got to earn your victories one input at a time. And then MK11 came along, and I was just amazed by the graphics and the gore, and I was like, you know what, maybe I should get back into fighting games, which I did. So at first I was struggling with the same old problems. I couldn't pull off consistent combos, and I couldn't get these special moves to come out cleanly. But when I picked up Scarlet, things started to click. Her combos were simple. Just 3 buttons in sequence, it wasn't that hard at all. And for the first time I felt I was finally starting to get fighting games. But even then, I realized that there's more to fighting games than just combos and special moves. You've got to understand neutral spacing and reads. It's a 1v1 battle. Every mistake is yours to own. There's no respawn button like in, most shooters. And I'm not talking about the battle royals. I'm talking about the team deathmatch, the dominations, which most people are probably playing. And, the Overwatch and all that. In fighting games, if you lose, it's on you. That kind of intensity is rare in other genres. You gotta hold that. And let's not forget how many characters and inputs you have to learn. MK alone has over 20 characters, each with unique moves and strings. Now imagine Tekken. In Tekken, some characters have 100+ moves. I'm looking at you, June, who happens to be my main. Just memorizing all of that is a challenge, let alone mastering it in real-time combat. Compare that to shooters where you understand the mechanics of aiming and shooting, you're pretty much set, you're good to go. So it's no wonder companies like Capcom introduce modern control schemes for fighting games. They understand. They recognize that the genre has a high barrier to entry, and simplifying inputs is their way of making their games more accessible. You don't see GTA or Call of Duty doing that because their controls are inherently simpler than fighting games. There might be more accessible options, but you guys know exactly what I mean. And sure, games like Call of Duty, Fortnite have hard mechanics as well. Like Fortnite, the insane building mechanics in Fortnite. But even in a game like Fortnite, you can hop in, avoid building altogether, and still snag a win. I'm not saying fighting games are the hardest genre out there, but they're definitely amongst the toughest when it comes to the sheer amount of time and dedication required to break through the initial barrier. Once you do though, it's magic. There's nothing quite like the feeling of mastering a character, learning their ins and outs of the neutral game, and finally understanding the strategy behind every move. So to wrap this up, I just want to say that I respectfully disagree with Sajam and people who believe fighting games are not inherently more difficult than other genres. I disagree 100%. I think fighting games demand a different kind of commitment, one that not everyone is willing to put in. But for people who do, for those of us that do, the payoff is very worth it. So Thanks for tuning in. Please, if you want to play fighting games and you're scared, put in time. It's time. Time is all it takes. There's nothing special about me. If I could break that, so can you. Some people it comes naturally to, but believe me, most people it doesn't. So I'm here telling you, don't give up. Just keep going. And if you do give up, it's okay. It's not for you, and that's okay. You can still support the FGC. Watch our videos, watch the clips. You can still play it with your friends, have fun. You know, you can play casuals, mash away, have fun. I did that for most of my life playing fighting games. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope this perspective helps shed some light on why I believe fighting games are, harder than most genres. So yeah, stay grinding FGC and see y'all on the battlefield. Have a good one. Peace.